The world around me spun into chaos, the screech of metal against metal echoing in my ears as the car accident unfolded. I felt a jarring impact, followed by darkness. When I finally opened my eyes, I was no longer in the familiar confines of my college life. Instead, I found myself thrust into a world that felt like the pages of a melodramatic CEO novel, where I was inexplicably cast as the domineering boss's ex-husband. The world around me spun into chaos, the screech of metal against metal echoing in my ears as the car accident unfolded. I felt a jarring impact, followed by darkness. When I finally opened my eyes, I was no longer in the familiar confines of my college life. Instead, I found myself thrust into a world that felt like the pages of a melodramatic CEO novel, where I was inexplicably cast as the domineering boss's ex-husband. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air as I blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights of a hospital room. Confusion washed over me like a cold wave. My mind raced. What had happened? The answer hit me like a freight train. I was now James Nicholas, a character whose tragic fate loomed like a dark cloud overhead. In a moment of desperation, I hastily signed the divorce settlement placed before me. The ink barely dried when I noticed the female CEO's expression darken, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "James Nicholas, have you thought this through?" she questioned, her voice sharp and cutting through the tension like glass. I instinctively clutched my wallet, feeling a surge of panic rise within me. Those astronomical alimony sums? Not a chance would I part with even a penny. My heart raced as I realized how precarious my situation truly was. After lying in that hospital bed for 3 long days, grappling with this bizarre transmigration into an alternate reality, acceptance began to settle in. I was no longer just James, a regular male college student, but rather the villain in this twisted tale, wielding my affluent family background like a weapon. The memories flooded back. Clara, the female lead. Our paths crossed at the university opening ceremony, where she stood out like a beacon amidst the crowd, stunningly beautiful yet undeniably vulnerable. She was everything one could hope for in a heroine, intelligent, driven, and hailing from an impoverished background that tugged at my heartstrings. Her father was deaf-mute, her mother battling uremia. Clara's life was a relentless struggle to provide for her family. It wasn't long before she reluctantly agreed to marry me, driven by desperation to fund her mother's medical treatment. In those early days of our marriage, Clara transformed from an overlooked employee into a rising star within the business world, a metamorphosis that should have filled me with pride, but instead ignited jealousy within me. Yet as time passed, our relationship began to fray at the seams. Clara slowly slipped from my grasp, her strength and independence becoming threats rather than assets in my eyes. I remained oblivious to her growing discontent until one fateful moment when my reckless behavior pushed her first love down the stairs, his legs shattered upon impact. That was the breaking point for Clara. Unable to endure my toxicity any longer, she filed for divorce. And then came the accident. Now, lying in this hospital bed, Clara stood before me again, her presence both familiar and foreign. She tossed the divorce agreement onto my lap with an exasperated sigh. "James Nicholas, are you done with your nonsense?" Her voice was icy. Impatience radiated from her piercing gaze. But even as I took in her striking features, high cheekbones accentuated by soft waves of hair framing her face, my heart betrayed me. No wonder the original owner had been infatuated. She was breathtakingly beautiful. My gaze flickered to the divorce agreement resting between us. As I read through it, my heart raced anew. Damn! I'm rich! True, the original James had wealth beyond imagination, but squandered it with arrogance and reckless abandon. He had been overshadowed by his more accomplished brother and had no claim to inherit their family company. Meanwhile, Clara's entrepreneurial spirit had propelled her wealth into stratospheric heights over just a few years. The divorce settlement would be staggering. My past good deeds had led me here, a windfall waiting to be claimed, and deep down, I felt I deserved it. Suppressing an eager smile that threatened to escape my lips, I lowered my gaze for what felt like an eternity. Finally gathering my thoughts, I took a deep breath and said, "All right, I agree to the divorce." Clara looked taken aback. Perhaps she hadn't expected such acquiescence from me. But lost opportunities can never be reclaimed. Before she could process my words further, I hastily signed my name on the dotted line. Her brows furrowed as she sensed something amiss. You? I turned away from her penetrating stare, feeling hollow inside as if all warmth had been stripped away. I've come to terms with it, Clara. Let's let each other go. Silence enveloped us like a heavy fog. As I prepared to retreat into my thoughts and calculate my newfound fortune again, I noticed Clara staring at the divorce agreement in silence, a storm brewing behind her eyes. "Aren't you leaving?" I asked curiously. She looked up sharply as if pulled from deep contemplation. I nudged gently. "What about Mr. Johnson? Isn't his injury still healing? Shouldn't you check on him?" Her expression turned cold in an instant, a stark contrast to the warmth that had once drawn me to her. A gnawing unease settled in my chest as Clara stormed out of the hospital room, her figure a whirlwind of frustration and determination. Was she regretting the decision to hand me such a hefty sum? Rationally, I reassured myself. My name was already signed on that divorce agreement. There was no turning back now. She couldn't deny it, even if she wanted to. In my mind, I justified my position. Considering my magnanimity, she should be grateful to pay me. After all, this was a transaction born out of necessity, not sentiment. Thoughts of Clara's past tugged at my conscience. Back in college, she had been inseparable from her sweetheart, Michael. Unlike the arrogant young men who flaunted their privilege, Michael was gentle and ambitious. He came from a single-parent family that struggled to make ends meet, yet he excelled in every aspect of life. They were kindred spirits, two souls intertwined by understanding and shared dreams. Without my interference, they would have likely graduated together, ready to carve their future in this bustling city and build a happy family. But I had ruined everything. In the original story, James, my predecessor, had been consumed by jealousy, constantly sabotaging Michael's efforts and even resorting to violence. As a result, Clara's affection turned to disdain. She severed ties with him completely. Just imagining it sent chills down my spine. Offending both the male and female protagonists sealed my fate as the wicked supporting character destined for misery. So here I was, left with one option: take the money and run. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Clara stormed out of the room. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding and smirked quietly to myself. Such a temper. But as thoughts of the wealth I could soon claim filled my mind, my spirits lifted. This kind of windfall wasn't something everyone stumbled upon. Just as I reveled in my newfound optimism, my phone buzzed with an Instagram message from Tracy. "Heard that Clara finally deigned to visit you today?" Her words dripped with mockery. Tracy was James Nicholas's childhood friend, a spoiled and self-willed young lady who thrived on indulgence. She relished in the finer things in life and looked down on Clara with disdain. Their animosity was palpable. Since Clara and I married, our families had interacted more frequently, leading to countless occasions where Tracy's father belittled Clara right in front of her, a source of endless irritation for Tracy. She often scorned me for being love-struck, teasing me about digging up wild vegetables in their garden like some lovesick fool. Now she was here to revel in my misfortune. But did I care? Not at all. I was too busy counting money and dreaming of riches to wallow in sorrow. "Yes, indeed," I replied after a moment's thought, snapping a picture of the divorce agreement and sending it her way. "As of today, I am single. Treat me to a meal." Tracy's response came almost instantly. She called me without hesitation, her voice laced with incredulity. "Are you insane?" Tsk! She had such a way with words. "I'll head over to the state family court for the stamp as soon as I'm out of this hospital," I said nonchalantly. Thankfully, the car accident hadn't been too severe, just a minor concussion from that head knock. "Don't you have anything to say?" Trace fell silent for a moment before bursting into laughter. "Sure. So what kind of gesture do you want, Mr. Nicholas?" I grinned at her playful tone. "I heard you opened a new bar." A week later, I slipped into an expensive suit that hugged my frame perfectly and strutted out of the hospital like a man reborn. Tracy folded her arms and scoffed as she caught sight of me. "Dressing up like a star after just leaving the hospital? Are you mad?" I clicked my tongue playfully. "What do you know? Today is a good day." Without another word, Tracy turned on her heel, only to bump right into Clara. Clara's gaze lingered on Tracy for a moment before her expression hardened into ice. "You're here," I exclaimed with an exaggerated smile as I approached them. "Where's the car?" Clara's demeanor softened slightly as she replied, "In the parking lot. Let's go." Tracy's displeasure was palpable. She narrowed her beautiful eyes at me like a hawk sizing up its prey. "James, aren't you taking my car?" I waved dismissively, as if swatting away an annoying fly. "Ah, I have to go with Clara to the state family court for our divorce papers. It's more convenient to take her car." With that proclamation hanging in the air like an unspoken challenge, I nudged Clara gently when she hesitated. "Why are you standing there? Let's go." Tracy chuckled brightly, her laughter ringing through the air like a melody. "Indeed, this matter is urgent. We can't dawdle." On the other hand, Clara stood beside me, her lips curling into a sarcastic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "James, you're so eager to sever ties with me." I raised an eyebrow in confusion. Wasn't it her who proposed this divorce? Why was she acting all strange and quirky now? "Primarily because I have other arrangements later," I replied candidly, trying to keep my tone light. "I just want to get this over with and not waste your time." Clara was always busy, her life a whirlwind of meetings and deadlines. The frequency of her returns home could be counted on one hand. I knew she didn't want to see me, and honestly, I had no intention of tangling with her any longer. Everyone returning to their own lives, free and easy, how wonderful would that be? With a cold turn of her shoulder, Clara walked away from me. The state family court was surprisingly quiet. It didn't take long for our names to be called. Just as we were about to enter the office, Clara's phone rang, slicing through the stillness like a knife. I caught a glimpse of the screen. It was Michael. Clara stepped aside to answer the call, her voice dropping to a gentle whisper that sent an unexpected pang through my chest. Still out, dealing with some issues. She had never spoken to me with such warmth. This marriage was never meant to be. For 5 long years, we had been locked in a constant battle, unable to share even a peaceful meal together, let alone show any genuine care for one another. "Are you going to proceed or not?" The officiant's voice broke through my thoughts, urging us forward. I shook my head, feeling a twinge of sympathy for the original James. In Clara's heart, I carried no weight at all. "Clara," I called out loudly, my voice echoing in the small space. "Can we handle my part first, please?" It was clear that Clara always prioritized Michael over me. Despite all our arguments and fights, she remained unmoved by my presence. The original James had been foolish to think he could outshine Michael. He was merely asking for trouble. The same went for Clara. By prioritizing me now, wouldn't it only hasten her return to her beloved? Clara's expression froze momentarily before she spoke into the phone again. "Ask Dr. Smith to check on you first. I will be there soon." 20 minutes later, I stood in front of the freshly issued divorce certificate, tears brimming in my eyes, not from sorrow but from exhilaration. Finally, it was mine. The hefty separation fee was finally mine. Starting today, I could travel, drink, eat, play, be a happy man. With sincerity in my voice, I turned to Clara and said, "Thank you and goodbye. Thank you for the money, and hopefully never seeing you again." As I stepped outside the courthouse, I immediately spotted Tracy waiting for me by her car, a striking red Ferrari that gleamed under the sunlight like a beacon of freedom. I strode over cheerfully. "Look at me, a rich man ready to splurge." Suddenly, a hesitant voice called out from behind me. "James." I turned quickly. Clara stood there with her red lips pressed tightly together. Her emotions were unreadable. If I were still the original host, I might have probed into the evident discomfort she was feeling. But now, I could hardly be bothered to pretend. "All right then," I said briskly. "I'm going now." I quickened my pace, determined to distance myself from both the male and female leads of this story. As Tracy and I drove away in her flashy car, I took one last look in the rearview mirror. Clara stood amidst the bustling crowd outside the courthouse, strangely lonely amidst the throng of people rushing by. Oh well, she must be relieved now that she is free from this troublesome creature, me. Tracy glanced at me sideways as we sped down the road. "Having second thoughts?" "Second thoughts?" I replied excitedly. "Are you keeping all the girls at your store for me?" Tracy sat beside me, her eyes wide with disbelief, a playful smirk dancing on her lips. "I really overestimated your emotions for her. I thought you loved Clara so much, and yet now that you're divorced, your face is full of joy. Oh, is it that obvious? I flipped down the Copilot mirror, scrutinizing my reflection. James Nicholas was now 28 years old. It felt as if I had aged 10 years overnight, but despite that, my face remained handsome and charming. More importantly, I was rich. A grin crept onto my face as I formulated a response. If she doesn't love me, then I simply don't need to love her anymore. As we waited at a traffic light, Tracy turned her head to study me, her gaze piercing through the air like a spotlight. The intensity of her observation made me squirm until she finally broke the silence with a teasing smile. After this car accident, you seem to have changed. My heart skipped a beat at her insight. I paused for a moment, glancing at her before shrugging nonchalantly. Perhaps after a life-and-death experience, one tends to gain a broader perspective on various matters. Tracy blinked in surprise before bursting into laughter, her voice light and infectious. You have a point. All right then, I'll cover all your expenses tonight. 2 hours later, however, Tracy regretted those words. She leaned over the bar with an exasperated frown, her voice laced with concern. Haven't you had enough yet? But she wasn't talking about the alcohol. She was referring to the parade of young women swirling around us in the club. I lifted my glass to her with a cheeky grin. Come on, join me for a drink. Tracy rolled her eyes dramatically. I patted her shoulder and gestured toward the circle of beautiful girls nearby. Look around. Each of these girls is lovely and sweet. Aren't they all better than my ex-wife? The original James had been utterly perplexing in his devotion. There were so many stunning women in the world. Wealthy and handsome as he was, why had he chosen to hang himself on that one tree? People always burden themselves with unnecessary worries. Tracy chuckled softly, shaking her head. Have you finally been cured of your blindness? Just then, a slender girl approached us with an alluring smile, pouring me a drink with practiced grace. Hey, handsome, would you like to taste this? Sure, sure. Just as I reached for the glass with eager anticipation, Tracy snatched it away from me. No mixing drinks. You just got out of the hospital, she declared firmly, eyes narrowing in mock seriousness. I don't want to be stuck dialing 911 for you. With that warning hanging in the air like an unspoken challenge, she shot a glance at the girl who had approached me. The girl's face paled instantly as she hurriedly lowered her head in apology. Sorry, I didn't know you just... I waved my hand dismissively, chuckling lightly. It's okay, I'm in a good mood today. Then I turned to Tracy with a teasing smile. Isn't it like robbing Peter to pay Paul? When your boyfriends feed you wine, you drink it happily. But when it comes to me, it's off limits.